Be informed, be inspired. Join us for the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show. Tune in and listen for both modern and ancient wisdom on all things maternity, parenting and sacred women's business, right here on the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show.
You're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet. Our show is coming to you from the studios of Bay FM in Byron Bay and is broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network. When it comes to birth, the standard line spoken by virtually all parents is, "as long as the baby is healthy." But when we say, "as long as the baby is healthy," it sounds to me as if we might be willing to sacrifice certain elements of birth, elements we consider unimportant. But what might those elements really be? What might we actually be giving up when we say, "as long as the baby is healthy"? You're here with me, Sally Cusack. I have identified 6 underlying beliefs to the statement, "as long as the baby is healthy," but I'm sure there are others. These I have based on my own experiences and my extensive research into birth as a maternity services advocate. The first 3 beliefs I have identified I covered in a previous podcast, and you can find this at iTunes or Spreaker.com by looking for our show Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. These first 3 beliefs that I covered were, "I am not qualified. Someone else needs to manage my birth." The second one was, "My rights and my health and safety are subordinate to my baby's. I must comply with my carer's treatment." And the third one was, "The hospital and my maternity carer wants the same outcome as me." The next 3, which I'll be covering in this show, are birth is dangerous and needs to be managed medically. Positive births are due to luck. The next one is labour and birth are simply painful, pointless torture. And the last one is my experience is irrelevant, and people who seek a positive experience in birth are selfish and exposing the baby to risk. Firstly, though, I want to flag with you another conversation I want to have in the future about our expectations of health and development we have for our kids. If they don't match our expectations for health, what then? Our kids are who they are and who they will be, each bringing their own unique qualities and contributions to this world. We have so much to learn and so much to gain from our children regardless of how they fit into our expectations. And does that focus on intervention block our view of what our children actually have to offer us? Secondly, the information in this show speaks in general terms only and in relation to studies, not individual experiences. We aim to share information for those births yet to happen. We want to offer to families looking forward to a baby's arrival the opportunity to learn from things that have happened in the past. Our hope is that we can continue refining and improving how we start this most transformative journey called parenting. We want new parents to stand on the shoulders of the giants who have walked before them. While this information is to help families improve future birth outcomes, I want to alert listeners to the possibility that this information may trigger some parents to ponder challenging aspects of their previous birth experiences. This is a natural reaction and one I have personal experience with. Navigating the medical system is very difficult, especially during such a vulnerable and emotional period. And sometimes we're left wondering if the outcome could have been better. However, we all did the best we could at the time. And there are resources available for addressing any unresolved feelings you may have, such as panda.org.au and birthtalk.org. I'll mention more of these at the end of the show. Birth is dangerous and needs to be managed medically. positive births are due to luck. I believe when people say this, it's underpinned by the ideas that birth carries a high risk of death or injury and that it needs to be managed by an outside expert, and that little can be done to prepare for birth and prevent danger from happening. Like anything in life, birth carries its own element of risk. Australia is ranked 21st in the world for maternal deaths, with a rate of just 7 in 100,000 pregnancies, most of which are caused by cardiovascular issues or suicide. Yes, suicide is a leading cause of death for mothers in their first year after birth. Risks of death or injury are linked to low socioeconomic status, coexisting medical conditions, age, number of previous pregnancies, previous caesarean sections, and lack of access to continuity of care. Our infant mortality rate is just under 4 in 1,000 births, which ranks us 24th in the world, just ahead of the UK, which is 26th in the world rankings. The USA, interestingly, is ranked 38th. Most of these deaths are due to extreme prematurity or congenital defects. To help visualise the relative risks of birth, the lifetime odds of dying in an accident involving a motor vehicle is 1 in 114. A baby has a 1 in 250 chance of not surviving the perinatal period in Australia, and a mother in Australia has a 1 in 14,000 chance of not surviving the perinatal period. Perinatal period indicates the pregnancy, birth and postnatal periods. However, in spite of the relatively low risk these days of death occurring during birth, a spectre of death nonetheless continues to hang over this process in our minds. Almost all births take place behind the closed doors of big institutions under the management of unknown professionals, and this has been the case for several generations now. When things don't go to plan, we hear only sketches of the events from the family. Even the parents themselves can be unclear as to how things panned out the way they did. And so these half-understood stories of fear, trauma, close shaves with death abound. It's little wonder 30% of us go into birth feeling petrified or terrified when we contemplate our births. 10% of us have such high fears of birth, we have a phobia known as tocophobia. Perhaps the most unfortunate aspect of this is that fear causes longer labours, which go on to have a higher risk of pain, leading to exhaustion and the need for medical intervention. More on this later. We are used to the medical model of deferring to professional expertise for our health, especially for birth, where most of us come to it with no experience. We're looking after another little person here too. Don't we just need to find the best possible carer and they can then manage the process for us? Unfortunately, research and health policy doesn't support that view. Instead, for the best possible outcomes, we need to find a carer we feel we can talk to, and then we need to partner with that person in managing our care together. When patients are not in control of the decisions regarding their care, their health is at a greater risk of failing. In fact, they're more likely to die. And health services are more likely to have higher readmissions and care costs and face more litigation. International research in this has led to our National Safety and Quality in Healthcare Standards. Standard number 2, called Partnering with Consumers, requires all health services to partner with their consumers or patients through the course of their care. The best way this partnership is achieved is by giving families continuity of their maternity care. As in any other area of healthcare, this leads to the best outcomes for mother and baby. In continuity relationships, carers have the time to discuss possible scenarios and how to deal with them. And the families have the time to ask questions, do their own research, and come to their own decisions. Family-centred care like this also requires a healthcare provider to support the family's decision, even if they personally don't agree with it. This is upheld in international human rights law and policies such as the AMA's maternal decision-making policy. However, the unfortunate reality is that less than 10% of pregnant people have the benefit of continuity of maternity care. This means over 90% of people see different carers through the course of their pregnancies, a different team again at their births and then again postnatally. Any opportunity to build up a profile of parents and child and their unique risk factors is lost in these situations. Perhaps this explains why, in spite of the ever-increasing amount spent on our health budget each year, Australia's stillbirth rates are virtually unchanged over the past 20 years, and why we are seeing unprecedented levels of perinatal depression, between 20 and 40% of mothers. And some of those mothers are experiencing full-blown PTSD. And so this brings us back to cultural fear of birth. Could this be caused, at least in part, by the decision-making around care not being a shared process between carer and family? When you reflect on the frightening stories of birth you know, how many of them were in situations where the labouring mother didn't know her carers? Research has shown how this lack of understanding of each other can contribute to situations becoming emergencies. Studies have found that two of the best antidotes for fear of birth is learning about the physiology of birth, particularly within a continuity of care model where the carer is experienced in normal birth, such as a midwife. This gives anyone who's pregnant the opportunity to address their fears one by one over time. Why look for a carer experienced in normal birth? The World Health Organization has found that at least 83% of women throughout the world birth without the need for surgery. This is a worldwide figure, so it includes populations from the developing world where access to proper housing and nutrition is restricted. Carers such as midwives are trained in normal birth. They study the many variations in birth that still occur safely and can detect early signs of birth deviating to abnormal. The Farm Midwifery Clinic in Tennessee, USA, takes the possibilities for reducing risk in birth much further than the WHO's statistic of 83% of births occurring normally, with approximately 95% of their women birthing without medical intervention. Their caesarean section rate is less than 2%, even though births at the farm include twins, breaches and vaginal birth after caesarean. Australia's caesarean section rate, by contrast, is 32%. And this low rate of intervention at the farm midwifery clinic doesn't place mothers or babies at extra risk. In fact, the mortality and morbidity rates are among the lowest in the world. During the reported period of 1970 to 2010, there were no maternal deaths at the farm, and the infant mortality rates at the farm are approximately 1.2 per 1,000 births, or 1 in 800 births. To give this some perspective, Australia's infant mortality rate is 4 in 1,000, or 1 in 250. I have spoken to some obstetricians about how they feel about birth. Dr. Kirsten Small, obstetrician and PhD candidate, believes birth as a fundamentally normal process. She also believes most obstetricians don't see birth this way.
Even for women who've got multiple risk factors, numerically speaking, the majority of them, if you do nothing and just wait for the pregnancy to unfold and the birth to occur, the vast majority of times the outcomes are going to be perfectly fine. We've got this kind of law of diminishing returns in obstetrics where we've sorted out the big common issues, and so now we're chasing the small percentages.
And Professor Alec Welsh, obstetrician from the Royal Hospital for Women, Sydney, and Professor of Maternal Fetal Medicine at the University of New South Wales, he has this to say about birth and his profession.
I guess, first of all, I was trained in a UK system. And the UK system is a lot more collaborative and a lot more midwife focused. It's also a very public system, so you lack some of those other commercial influences. So I think that was what drove my belief in maternity care as being a function of normality and a core of being normality. And in a way, the obstetrician's role has been